And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection, your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Throughout Canadian history, governments have at times used prorogation to their own advantage. The main purpose of prorogation is to wipe clean the older paper of old or existing business and to set a new legislative agenda. On today's Open Connection, MP Taylor Bachrach shares what he's been doing since the break.
You know, there was the Christmas break and then people were expecting to go back to Parliament. Usually at the end of January, we go back to Parliament. And the Prime Minister decided to hit pause. And this is something that Prime Ministers do from time to time. It's kind of is it a get out of jail free card? In our system, the Governor General decides ultimately when Parliament sits. And the Prime Minister can go to the Governor General and say, I want you to prorogue or to pause this Parliament. And in the case of the Liberals, they're in all sorts of turmoil trying to find a new leader. The Prime Minister, decided finally, after a long time, to step aside. I think that's a decision he could have made quite a long time ago. But now we're in this funny place where Parliament isn't sitting. And it's a really critical time because there's some big stuff happening in Canada and in the world. And yet Parliament won't be coming back at this point until the end of March, late March. So it's a time as an MP, obviously MP's work is a lot of different things. It's not just sitting in the House of Commons. It's also traveling around the riding, meeting with constituents, understanding what the issues are locally and advocating to the government, carrying that voice to the government. There still is a federal government that's operating, even though Parliament isn't sitting. And so I continue that part of the work, ensuring that the ministers and the cabinet are aware of what's going on for communities in our region.
There was almost every day there seemed to be some kind of confrontation or vote. Did it get pretty tense during that time?
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. It was pretty tense. There's a lot of politics going on. Every party is kind of trying to triangulate and strategize and find some way to gain the upper hand. That's an aspect of politics. I got into politics to represent community and to try to get things done for people, right? And that's really how we've approached this past Parliament, trying to use the tools we have, use the power that we have to drive change and to get things done for folks. And so when things devolve into that, really, really partisan, really political stuff, it makes it more challenging to get stuff done for people. It's part of our system though. And, we're coming up to a point where we're going to have a federal election and people are going to get to decide the direction of the country. That's really important. I imagine we'll have an election by this spring. That seems to be how the stars are aligning. And our leader has been pretty clear about where we stand on things. Looking at the Liberal leadership race, chances are, I think it's pretty clear who the front runner in that race is. And if Mr. Carney is successful in becoming leader, he will be in a strange position where the Prime Minister of Canada doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons. That's pretty untenable. That can't go on for very long. So so we're heading to the polls before too long, and so it's a chance to get out there in community, connect with people, talk about the times that we're in and the issues that we're facing. And compared to 2 months ago, Robert, the issues we're facing now are just completely different. The preoccupation of the country and what people are talking about, given the election of Donald Trump and his return to the White House, we're in a situation as a country that we haven't been in a long, long time, if ever.
Were you kind of surprised when the U.S. president made a offer?
Oh, I wouldn't call it an offer. I would call it a threat. This is a guy who is just playing well outside the bounds of any sense of what has been normal for a U.S. president. And, I was reading somewhere that he kind of comes from this WWE sort of style of politics where the more outrageous and the more over the top and the more outlandish, the better. And he's throwing out these really absurd threats and claims. And it's part of his, his approach to that position, which is really difficult. I think we have a less predictable relationship with the United States than perhaps we've ever had. And the idea of Canada becoming part of the United States is just so out to lunch. I don't know how else to communicate it. Like, this is not something that we're ever going to allow to become reality. I did see a poll that something like 24% of conservative voters actually like that idea. But I've got to tell you, as the MP and as someone who loves this country, I am absolutely opposed to any semblance of becoming part of the United States. They're a very different country. The reason I'm proud to be Canadian is because I think we're a country where we take care of each other. We have a sort of a shared sense, a shared identity as, people who look out for their neighbors. And we've built a national set of policies around that.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. As of 2024, 73 of 195 countries worldwide have UHC, resulting in about 69% of the world's population having some form of universal health care. Let us return to the conversation as MP Bachrach shares about the health care in U.S., the only developed country not to have UHC.
In Canada, we have universal health care. In the United States, did you know that, I just learned this recently, that the number one cause of bankruptcy is people being unable to pay their hospital bills? I know people in Canada, my neighbors, who've had to deal with incredible sickness and have had really traumatic things happen, and these healthcare journeys that have been have taken a long time, and if they had to pay for every dollar of that, people who are facing cancer diagnoses, people who are having major surgery, in the United States, if you don't have insurance, private insurance, the cost of that can be devastating. And so, for a long time, since the 1960s in Canada, we've said everyone should have access to basic health care. And I just think it's such an important thing to uphold. It's one of the things that really distinguishes us from the Americans. So the silver lining in all this, and I know I'm talking on and on, the silver lining in all this, Robert, is that just in the past, I would say 3 weeks or a month, people have really come together. There's this new sense of unity as a country, pushing back against this tariff threat coming from Donald Trump. And people are saying, no, heck no, we're our own country. We're going to stand up for what it represents, and we're going to push back. And I think that's really heartening, as scary as the tariff threat is. And, if those 25% tariffs were to become a reality, they'd be devastating. We'd lose thousands of jobs in Canada. So the fact that folks are starting to work together and push back with a united front, I think that's...
To actually say to, okay, I was part of that movement to bring forth dental health care for our seniors and also for our children.
Yeah, for sure. I am proud of that. It's something that makes a lot of sense. And we came in 2021, we had an election, and the people of Canada, delivered a minority government. And they said, this is what we want to represent us. And in those circumstances, you have a choice as a political party. You can continue with the kind of gamesmanship and positioning and partisan politics of trying to fight the next election right away, or you can try to find some way to use the power that you have in Parliament, work across party lines, and get things done for people. And that's the decision that we made, because there were some policies that we've been pushing for a long time that we just haven't had the horsepower in Parliament to make them a reality. And so, dental care was at the top of the list, because everyone knows that the health of your teeth, the condition of your teeth, is connected to your overall health. And I meet I'm constantly traveling around and knocking on doors, talking to people. I meet so many people, especially seniors, who have major dental issues but couldn't go to the dentist because it cost them an arm and a leg. And so here's a program. It's not a perfect program, but it's allowing so many people to go to the dentist, some of them for the first time, and get their teeth fixed. And it's just like, I start feeling really emotional when I talk to people and they're like, I went to the dentist. It wasn't free. I had to pay $100, but it was going to be $2,000. It was going to be $3,000, and I was able to get my teeth fixed. That can be a life changer for people. So, adding that as part of our healthcare offer here in Canada, and seeing that program expanded over time, I think it's something that we should be really proud of, not just as a party, but as Canadians, that we're now saying, you know what, everyone deserves basic access to dental care. So yeah, it's working. There's still improvements needed. It's not working for everybody, but the program's up and running. There's dentists here in Terrace, there's dentists in Smithers, there's dentists in Prince Rupert and other communities in the Northwest that are providing those services. People are getting signed up. And so right now it's available for seniors who earn less than $90,000 per year and don't have insurance, for young people under 18 from households in the same circumstances, and for people with disabilities. And what we're waiting on, and the Liberals are dragging their feet, they're kind of notorious for dragging their feet, but we're waiting on the final expansion, which is going to be everyone in Canada who earns less than $90,000, doesn't have insurance, and needs access to dental care. When we have a federal election, I think largely that's what it's going to be about. It's going to be about Canada's place in the world relative to the United States. Who are we as Canadians? What do we value? And that's a really important conversation for us to have.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In Canada, the government must maintain the support of the majority of the members in Parliament to stay in power. A majority government is formed when a political party has more than half the seats in the House of Commons. Let us return the conversation as MP Bachrach shares what happens when there's minority government.
The relationship or the arrangement that we were in was about using our power as an opposition party to force the government, the Liberal government, to do a number of things. And so that relationship is no longer a thing. We terminated that arrangement. And so now, we're in a position of taking everything on its merits when the House was sitting, taking each vote on its merits and looking at each bill based on what was being put forward. Now, you said when Parliament comes back, it's unclear if Parliament will come back. I think we're in a very uncertain situation. The incoming Prime Minister, the leader of the Liberal Party, is going to be the Prime Minister of Canada, believe it or not. It's a funny aspect of our system, but they could choose to call an election right away. We've committed that if the House comes back, that it's time for an election and that we'll take steps to make that happen. But yeah, the ability to continue to try to get wins for Canadians in this Parliament, that window's closing. It's pretty much closed. And so now, we need to go out to people and talk about, what's the vision for the future of our country? And to talk about that in the context of this wild tariff threat from the United States, threats to our economy, threats to our sovereignty. It's a very different conversation than it was even 6 months ago, because suddenly we're faced with, really, it's about Canada's independence in the face of a much less reliable trade partner in the United States and diplomatic partner. So it's gonna cause ripple effects, and there's a lot of talk about buying Canadian. This is something I've always been really passionate about, but I think now more and more people are saying, you know what, we gotta support producers here in Canada. We gotta support Canadian business. We gotta look for that little label that says product of Canada, made in Canada. And I think we can even go one step further, which is in the Northwest, we can look for local opportunities, not just buy Canadian, but buy local. Because there's so many amazing producers here in the Northwest, whether you're talking about farmers, whether you're talking about small-scale manufacturers, you're talking about local businesses that sell a whole range of things. I think that whole buy local ethos, we can double down on that, and it's going to make our economy stronger, more resilient. It's going to make our region stronger, and that all filters up to creating a stronger Canada and putting us in a place where we're more able to push back when our trade partners come come at us with wild stuff like, the incoming president has. So that's what I'm thinking a lot about these days. That's what's on people's minds when I'm knocking on doors and talking to people. They're like, we got to do something. This is a big threat.
What was your initial reaction when you heard that they were going to impose a 25% tariff?
Well, the first reaction was pretty similar to most people's, that this could be devastating, right? I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how tariffs work. And actually, I saw some footage, some television interviews with Americans after the election. And they were really enthusiastic about tariffs because they thought other countries were going to have to pay them. And when it was explained to them that, no, actually American firms pay these tariffs when they import products from Canada, from China, etc., that really changed their thinking about it. But of course, even though it's American firms that would pay the tariffs, the costs of that filter down through the economy and also affect Canadians, because if those firms choose to find other suppliers for their products in the United States or in another country that doesn't have tariffs, then that means fewer jobs for the Canadians that provide those goods and services, right? And so that affects our economy at home. Plus, Canadians buy a lot of goods that are made in the United States. And so if the tariffs result in American producers having to increase their prices, that means Canadians would be paying more. So it's really, it's something that hurts Americans, it hurts Canadians. I don't see who wins in all of that. And hopefully more and more people see that. Hopefully more and more Americans see that and put pressure on the president to reverse course. Because, that relationship has been important for a long, long time.
So this is giving you extra time, a lack of a better word, to get out in the community. And I guess one of those communities you've been to recently was Hartley Bay. How did that go?
Yeah, it was great. It's actually been quite a while since I was in Hartley Bay. I have been there before, but it's a more remote community, and so you need a bit more time. And so I was there with Tamara Davidson, who's the new MLA for North Coast Haida Gwaii. And we spent a few days connecting with the Gitgat and got out on the water with their coastal guardians, which was really special. There's a new lifeboat station there with the Canadian Coast Guard. So the folks at the Coast Guard were generous enough to take us out on their boat and talk a little bit about their role on the coast. And then just connecting with the community. We held a little meet and greet and talking about some of the projects in the area. They're working on a really exciting hydro project, and their vision is to get off diesel power entirely. Right now, their electricity comes from a diesel generator, and they want to move on to clean, renewable power. And so seeing the work that they've done over the past few years, they've built a road up to their second lake, and that's part of this vision of building a power project for the community. It's great. It's one of the really neat things about this region, this riding, is there's so many remote communities that have a unique history, and they have I think a unique culture in all of Canada. When you live in a remote place like that, it's different than living anywhere else. And to get to experience that, and then try to think about how we give voice to those places, how I as MP give voice to those places, and ensure that the federal government, which is, by and large preoccupied with the big cities of Canada, that these small remote places have needs. They have unique needs, and they're part of the fabric of our country, and they deserve attention. They deserve investment.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
According to Statistics Canada report, more than 6 in 10 Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual assault in their lifetime. In addition, Indigenous women and girls are greatly overrepresented amongst long-term unresolved missing persons cases. In this final segment of Open Connection, MP Bachrach gives us some history of Manitoba's Red Dress Alert.
The federal government funded a pilot project in Manitoba, which is great. That province needs it really badly as well. But we're trying to build momentum here in British Columbia and send a message to the BC government and the federal government that it's time for something here in BC. Of course, our region is home to the Highway of Tears, and having that Red Dress Alert, which would send a message out on the cell phone network anytime someone goes missing in our region, that meet certain criteria that would be set up in consultation with the families, with law enforcement, all of these different things. It's a practical step that would get more people searching, ensure that, the appropriate care and concern is being shown, and that everyone possible is out there looking, has a description of who's missing, knows where they were seen last, and knows who to contact if they have any information. And we know that the first 24 hours is so critical after someone goes missing, that this would be a way to marshal as many resources so that everyone out there, if you're driving through a community, if you're going to the gas station, you're on the lookout for someone who's gone missing.
With the red dress alert, that's kind of like a step or mirrored, lack of a better word, of the Amber Alert.
Yeah, it's very much the same idea. Yeah, same technology, same idea. And we know how that works, right? And people get the Amber Alert on their phones, so they understand it. It's a pretty simple concept, but it's an important one. And I've been talking to folks up and down the region, and there's a real intuitive understanding that this would be a positive step forward. So we're going to keep pushing.
What needs to be done to get it to that next step?
Yeah. Good question. Like, sometimes it can be so frustrating how slow things move sometimes, especially when you know that a situation involves people's safety. It's a critical issue that affects so many families in our region. And yet you look at the calls to justice from the National Inquiry and how few of them have been implemented. It's incredibly frustrating. The pace of change is far too slow. When it comes to the red dress alert specifically, what we need the BC government and the federal government to come to an agreement, like they did in Manitoba, and to create, a project to put that technology in place and to get it working, to have the conversations with the organizations that work on that issue, organizations like Tears to Hope right here in Terrace and Prince Rupert working in this region, and put together the protocols and the systems that would allow that red dress alert to function. That's the next step. So we're just building awareness. We're getting people to sign postcards to the Federal Minister of Public Safety saying this is a priority for our region. And the more people do that, the more the federal government is going to know that this is something that matters to people here. And it's going to be a good day when we get that up and running. We have a lot of work to do as communities, as society, to stop gender-based violence against women and children. It's a huge problem. It's going to take everybody, and we, in some ways, we have steps that have been laid out. We've had commissions of inquiry, we've had studies, we've had reports. I don't know if we need more of that. What we need now is we need political will. We need action. And the red dress alert is one of those steps that would move things forward. There are a lot of other things that are laid out in the National Inquiry's calls to justice. So we'll keep pushing. And it's an issue that's it's close to my heart. I know it's close to a lot of people's hearts because it's had such an impact here.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.